count up just a little bit so that Cecil can have something to snip. See the shirt I'm wearing, Bob? You like that? Sadie's.
Oh, yeah. Nicely
Delicioso.
done. Little local flavor.
Oh, man. Sadie's is so good. I think I went 3 times when we were there. We can never go enough. All right, let's do this thing. Which Kansas City Chiefs running back will be worth more by the end of the year? That and more this week on the couch. Bob, Clyde Edwards-Helaire owners got a little bit of reassurance, but will it be temporary as Le'Veon Bell joins the Chiefs on the field this week?
Yeah, the range of possible outcomes. Depends on which end you live on. If you live on the LaShawn McCoy end, if you're the eternal optimist, then this is going to be fine. I think it's probably not going to be at that end of the possible range of outcomes, though. Le'Veon Bell's not washed up to the degree that it appeared LaShawn McCoy was. But it seems like, look, as we came into season, Sig, we were drafting this kid at, 6. We were pretty much drafting him at ceiling. As you draft everyone you draft in the first round, you're pretty much drafting him at ceiling. And in all fairness, it's been really good, except for the one part that we've come to count on from Chiefs running backs, which is touchdowns. So, not having those and then suddenly having a guy who might be capable of getting those. And it's been, kind of ugly, when they give him the opportunities at the goal line, he just can't seem to drive the pile. And, in general, though, I think he's at the top of the yards per scrimmage. Certainly running back 1 in fantasy production is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And this is going to be a little bit of a hit, I guess. But since he wasn't getting the touchdowns already, you can maybe tell yourself a happy story that you're going to keep getting what you've been getting from him, which is not probably as happy as people would want that drafted him with that 6th, 5th, 7th pick overall.
No, I don't think we're getting that. And since week 1, it hasn't looked like we're going to get that. But is there something there with Le'Veon Bell? Really, it's the question of, was it just Adam Gase? And now that he's out from under the thumb of Adam Gase, we're going to see Le'Veon play some good football. And look, this backfield can support 2 fantasy relevant running backs. It doesn't have to be an either or scenario. Can it be a both scenario with Le'Veon Bell?
I think it will be both, honestly. And I think it can be. And again, you already weren't getting the touchdowns. So, the hope that you were going to get them at some point maybe is minimalized. But that doesn't mean you're not going to get them. I think it's not always, the subtraction by addition. Sometimes, the pregame reporting by Jay Glazer, where Andy Reid said, we want to keep our little guy, from getting hammered. And, that makes some sense, right? What backfield is really totally owned by one player these days? That's rare. And Edwards-Helaire isn't, the biggest guy on the block. So, and we'll see what Le'Veon Bell is. I know, it's easy to, use the gaze curse on every player because, we see it every time we watch and get pretty much every game you watch. That guy used to play for Adam Gase, right? But there's guys that show up and play good. Jamison Crowder says, what Adam Gase jinx, So, I don't want to put too much into that, but I want to put some into that. It just never happened. It seemed like Gase was never all in on him in the first place. Also, the offensive line has not been good there. It's going to be better here. The offense in general is going to be better. So, I think if you were, you'd invested in Le'Veon Bell, nothing could make you happier than this. This is like a best possible outcome, except maybe Miami, where maybe he would have gotten the full workload or something closer to the full workload. But I think this is good news if you've invested in Bell.
Since you brought up Miami, Bob, we got the news this morning about Tua Tagovailoa. And it's not that he's not ready. I'm just sad because I like watching Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Right.
For fantasy, does this move the needle? Do we trust Tua enough to keep the values of these targets and Myles Gaskin intact?
I'm going to trust the coaching staff a little bit on this one. They seem to have done a really good job. This is something I've been talking about even, before this season. I just was really impressed with the way Brian Flores has come in and building a culture there before, and it seems like it's been a long-term project. So I've had a lot of faith in how he's running the organization and how the organization in general, Chris Greer, is being run. And it just makes perfect sense to me from, the long-term standpoint that they've taken since their installation, right? And when you see some of the success that other teams are having with Joe Burrow, and I mean success in that, not failure. And Herbert, I think I think this, and we know the path to the Super Bowl. There's a blueprint. If you get that quarterback on his rookie contract in there and succeeding, you can surround him with great talent. Because of the cap implications there. So it makes perfect sense to me. I don't know why you wouldn't do it. And I suspect they've seen enough of this kid in practice to know where he's at. You've heard the reporting too that it's time. He's ready. So I'm eager to see. So the guys that I'm only heavily invested in, Devontae Parker, I didn't overpay for him. Nobody did. You're getting him in the 6th round in drafts. And so you hope that role continues, or he continues to play as productively. Myles Gaskin, you picked him off as a waiver wire pickup. No reason not to expect him to continue doing what he's been doing, especially after they didn't make a bigger push to get Bell, right? Mm-hmm. So I think all the plans are in line. I think the things that we couldn't have foreseen, the Adam Shaheen and Durham Smythe arrival, limiting Mike Gesicki, the guy that we all saw coming is the next big thing. Maybe he's not, but I don't think this really changes that much from that perspective. We'll see. But I'm going to have a little faith in the coaching staff.
I agree with that. And I think it's the coaching staff's plan. I think they had a plan before the season started that after the bye, as long as Tua was physically able to, he was going to start. And they're going to stick with their plan. We had fun entertaining the ideas, Bob, of Ryan Fitzpatrick being traded to the Cowboys, but that's just fun. It's just fun. In an alternate universe somewhere, we can play that out. But in this universe,
there's going to be a lot of talk about a lot of guys getting traded to and from Dallas here in the next week or two, I suspect.
Yes. And on that note, let's get into Instant Overreaction Tuesday because it was bad. It was really, really bad. Bob, there's certain teams, certain games you watch where you just feel the sense of discouragement. Is that even a word? There's this sense of like giving up on life, basically, that really embodies a bottoming out. Enough that people are rightfully asking, well, should Mike McCarthy be fired? Players are speaking out. They're not teaching us anything. They're not adjusting. We know what these indicators mean, Bob. But for fantasy, this can be something to take advantage of, like buying when there's blood in the streets, because, there's blood in the streets. Should we be buying parts of the Cowboys offense?
The part called Dalton Schultz, because you can get him cheap and relatively cheaply right now. These are classic, buy. We get caught up in the moment. We look down the drinking straw. We see the misery at the moment, and we think, oh man, and whether we're on I got to move this side, and I think the people who take the little wider view, take the view of, man, this is a chance to maybe get something on the cheap. But I think the things you want to buy would be, like Ezekiel Elliott. I'm not sure I want to buy that because I'm also buying a piece of the offensive line. That's not very good right now. The receiving core, and it just, Zach Martin, the concussion last night only added to the litany of woes, right? It's been a miserable injury situation on that offensive line. So, two things. Number one, we're finding out we're getting an idea right now of how good Dak Prescott might really be, right?
Right.
That's first thing. And number two, we're finding out that Andy Dalton is Andy Dalton. He is alternately the red rifle or the redheaded stepchild.
Right.
He will be both in any given moment or from game to game. And so I think, the receiving components here are, the downfield threats, I think they're all going to be fine at times, and they're going to have horrible games at times. And I think the biggest hope that you have for all those pieces, if you've already invested, is the fact that the defense is so bad. And God bless him, man. Mike Nolan is kind of a friend of mine. I know him a little bit. And I feel horrible, man. It's not working. And one of the complaints that you hear, and we've heard in the past with him, is it's really complex, the defense, and the players aren't playing instinctively, can't fly to the ball. They're trying to think too much. So as long as that defense is playing as poorly as it's playing now, and we can say this about a lot of teams right now. I'm looking at you, Jacksonville, and others. But as long as the defense is playing as poorly as it is, you have that puncher's chance of guys coming up with big games at any given time. And the week before, when Andy Dalton came in, when Dak was hurt, he had Gallup on some nice throws right down the field. He was supposed to throw down the field. So you have that hope. It shouldn't be the expectation, though.
That's a good way to put it, because the game script's going to continue to be there. But as you characterized Dalton so well, I mean, in ideal surroundings, he can unlock the value of an offense. I mean, there's so many quarterbacks we can say this about now, right? Like Jimmy Garoppolo,
Right.
Jared Goff. I mean, he's one of the Kirk Cousins. He's one of those quarterbacks, and the surroundings are not ideal, even though maybe the skill players around him are. He's got to have that time. He's not going to be able to create on his own. And once he's outside of structure, you're just saying, sit down and throw the ball away, please. Don't cause anything worse to happen, right? I mean, that's a positive. Once the initial play doesn't work, Andy, just sit down, man. So we'll see.
I think the fumbling issues for Zeke, I mean, that seems like such a rarity. But if you want to catch that, that Zeke investor in a down moment,
right,
this is it, right?
It's true.
Leverage that. Drop that hammer if you got it.
Yeah, we'll see what they do. And they're still a first-place team.
Right.
So,
I mean, they're in the thick of it. God bless the NFC East.
It's wild. You mentioned Jacksonville. And again, I think, and I really appreciate, Bob, that you've been doing this long enough that you can put in context what it generally means, like canary in the coal mine kind of stuff, whenever players speak out about Mike McCarthy. What we saw last week in Jacksonville was DJ Chark, when they asked him, what did Detroit do to take you guys out of the game? And he said, I thought we were open. So he understands. Look, players understand the difference between keeping that in-house and not. And
right.
Usually that doesn't happen without a build-up. So, I mean, do you think we're going to see Gardner Minshew maybe sit, or is this Gardner Minshew starting to swirl down the drain, even though his fantasy numbers don't show it yet?
The latter. But I think he's kind of been swirling around the entire time, right? I mean,
right.
That's kind of been defining of the definition of his career is he's, he won't go down without a fight, but he's going to go down, right?
Yeah.
Because he was destined to from the beginning. It's a horrible team around him. It's, I mean, I'm not anti-Jay Gruden, but I maybe his hands are tied a little bit, given the level of talent overall and what he's up against on the other side of the ball, where Todd Wash and Doug Marrone have decided they're going down with that. And they are going to go down at some point. I just can't imagine this. I know Shad Khan is a long-term thinker, but there comes a point where you have to accept the reality, and it's the defense is what's dragging them down more so than the offense. But Gardner Minshew isn't the answer there, and they know it. And at this point, maybe they just keep everything in place. I hate to bring up the cliche, but it's there, man. The tank for Trevor is there. Unfortunately, they are competing with the Jets, and I don't know if anyone can keep up with them or keep down with them.
Yeah, I like that. It'll be interesting to see. I love seeing Keelan Cole doing better. James Robinson,
well.
Yeah, and going into a contract year, he's a fun story as an unlikely undrafted free agent. But I just think these are things that we know. These player comments is a sign, because I like to say, Bob, we're peeking through keyholes. And that's a chance maybe where we can hear through the walls, like the neighbors and what they're fighting about, and maybe we'll know, before the cops have to be called.
I'm going to miss Gardner Minshew because, the women in my life had forcibly removed the jorts from my possession, and Minshew's return brought them all back, and I'm going to have to get rid of them again.
Yeah, there you go. Gardner Minshew, what he's given us has nothing to do with football. It's just that kitsch, even bordering on camp. With the persona and the way, so good for him, and he certainly knows how to maximize what he has to offer to America, which is a lot, even if it isn't necessarily a fantasy quarterback. Okay, let's go back to Overreaction Tuesday and watching on Monday. Josh Allen, Bob. Oh, it was so beautiful, but it feels like we woke up from a great dream and we're back in reality. You have any diagnosis whether we should believe what we saw in September or what we're seeing in October from Josh Allen?
Yeah, we should believe the middle lane, right? I mean, he is capable of, again, not to go all Harmon on you here, but the range of outcomes, I mean, we've seen them. And I'm going to say, I think, number one, I owe Stephon Diggs an apology every time I say his name.
Right.
For the great disrespect the slander I rained down on him all summer long. He is an amazing player. Nothing demonstrates that more than the touchdown catch last night, right? And he's playing with a quarterback where you need to be able to make some of those catches, I think. So look, I think Josh Allen is going to be a great fantasy quarterback, right? And he's going to be an up and down NFL quarterback. Even in a game where he only threw for 122 yards, I think was his least since for a while. Don't know the date, but I could look it up. Lowest since week 6 of his rookie season. There, I just looked it up. And
Amazing.
But I think, from a fantasy, and he can be that guy. But from a fantasy perspective, he kind of gives you some of the same things that he gives you the NFL version. I wish they would let him run more. It seems like they're making a concerted effort to keep him from running as much. And let go of that, Buffalo Bills. Brian Dable, I'm talking to you, young man. Let that guy run. Take advantage of his skills, and because the other guys who are running the ball aren't getting the job done for sure, right? So I think over the course of the season, am I expecting him to finish as a top 10 fantasy quarterback? Absolutely. Is that going to get the Bills where they want to get, and where they want to get is the playoffs? And this is a great opportunity. It might still get them there. I think he's throwing the ball better in general, right?
Yeah.
It seems to me. Just watching him and comparing him. I haven't sat down and compared and looked next, side by side at what he's doing this year. But it just seems, and maybe it's just he's getting better play at wide receiver with the arrival of Stephon Diggs. I've always, I think John Brown is an amazing player. I wish he would catch more of the balls thrown his way after last night. But in general, I mean, when you have two pieces, and in particular John Brown, who can run past whoever is across from him any snap, right? That's really helpful, and it helps the quarterback out. So I have high hopes for Josh Allen going forward. Mostly because of my heavy investments in him across the board.
Well, look, he's just one of those players, I think, that the girl with the curl, right? I mean, whenever he's good, he's really, really good. But whenever he's gripping, whenever he's pressing, it slides. It gets away from him. More the pressure he puts on himself, the more, and when you see it's those little layup throws, when he starts missing those throws, then everything starts to become unraveled. And when he's in his rhythm, go ahead.
Yes, I need that. Well, I need that, number one, because I know Scott Barrett is watching this right now, and in his league in the DFB Invitational, which I'm in, that is like the only bankable asset I have in a super flex league. I need him to be that guy. But honestly, all kidding aside, I think he, I think he's better than people thought he was coming in. Right, that there was a lot of skepticism. And I think he's proving the skeptics wrong. And if he can continue to improve his accuracy, and they can dial him up plays and continue surrounding him with talent, maybe at the backfield now, that matches what they've added in the receiving core, that will help him out as well.
Let's talk about some other quarterbacks that are slipping, Bob. Cam Newton. I mean, and in some ways, you could say this is the lack of weapons catching up with him. N'Keal Harry's worthless. Julian Edelman looks broken. Better as a quarterback than a receiver. Damiere Byrd can only do so much as a deep target. I mean, Damiere Byrd should be your fourth or fifth receiver.
Yeah, Twitter just reflects it. I just saw Twitter twitch a little bit when you said his name.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the point is, and there's nothing at wide receiver. I mean, you can't make an offense around James White. Are we asking Cam Newton to do too much? For a little bit, it looked like that Seattle game was glorious, but now again, it feels like we're back in reality. Is this just reality with Cam Newton this year?
I felt like you lock Bill Belichick in a room for 2 weeks, he's going to have a pretty good plan, coming out of that closet.
Yeah.
But part of it, and he was the first to say it, right? We need more time together, and I think we're going to see some improvement there. I agree with that. They need more time together. Look, I put a lot of faith in coaches and systems, because that's ultimately what the best measuring stick we have. NFL is such a week-to-week game, and maybe even more so this year than ever.
Yes.
We're seeing it, on the weekly here. But I do have some faith in, and I think, when you look at Cam, when you look at that Seattle game, granted, Seattle's defense not good, but you see the potential of what could be every week. I mean, there are going to be weeks where Julian Edelman turns into a viable deep threat, right? But there's also going to be weeks where this is all on Cam's shoulders, and he's going to have to carry it as a runner as much as a passer, because for the reasons you outlined, it's a pretty barren landscape in terms of his downfield weapons, and he's shown a lot of faith in N'Keal Harry, to his credit, and even when maybe he shouldn't have. And so maybe he can spin that straw into some gold for us here at some point, or if not gold, at least copper, or something that a meth head would come steal off the side of our house. But
it's the times. It's 2020, Bob. Yes.
Right. But I think Cam Newton. The thing that my only questions about Cam Newton were coming in were, is he still Cam Newton? We had not seen him. I mean, it'd been 3 years since we saw him threaten opponents' defenses deep with his arm, right? I've seen him do that now. It's been a couple of years since we've really seen him effectively run the ball. I've seen him do that now.
Yeah.
I know he's capable of that. And I also know the coaching staff is capable of maximizing those abilities because they've done it before with other players. I'm old enough to remember Tim Tebow was a thing in Denver, right? And that was Josh McDaniels making adjustments to his offense to get the most out of a different kind of quarterback. So I have a little bit of faith in the coaching staff there. Turns out they have a long track record of success, and I suspect they'll get the most out of Cam. Does that mean he's going to be a starting quarterback every week? No, we just saw it last week. But this is a weird year, and you're going to need to play guys you don't necessarily want to play, especially as we get it deeper in the winter. So I think he is a viable play.
Yeah, he is. Well, the rushing touchdown, even on a week afternoon, salvaged something, and he had a catch too. In PPR leagues.
There you go.
But certainly the cupboard could be bare in the passing game. A really interesting matchup this week, New England, San Francisco, because you have to think that on the defensive side, New England's going to know how to put the clamps on that passing game with lacks a vertical element for San Francisco. But we'll see what San Francisco Robert Saleh can cook up against Cam Newton. Moving right along, another quarterback, Bob. We already talked about Mike McCarthy's old team, new team. Let's talk about his old team. Sorry. Aaron Rodgers. And it was real easy and tidy before last week, Bob, to say Aaron Rodgers he's got a pep in his step. He's happy. He's motivated by the first round pick. However you want to put it, he seemed like a changed man. And he was that dialed in Aaron Rodgers, even to the point where it looked like he was playing nice with others. He was running the offense and then taking his shots when it was appropriate and so on. And then we see Green Bay go down to Tampa Bay. And maybe this is just Tampa Bay, Bob. And by the way, the Super Bowl's in Tampa. So maybe, the hope is alive for that home team in the Super Bowl with that defense. Maybe it's just the Tampa defense.
That
maybe
is the hell, yes. Yeah.
Todd Bowles, another TB. Forget Tom Brady. Todd Bowles is the TB in Tampa Bay that really deserves the kudos right now. But do you think that this is the kind of thing that leaves a mark on Aaron Rodgers, that maybe because the team looked soft? I really hate to use that word because I think it has got connotations, but wow, did they, what's the say, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. They got punched in the mouth over and over and over again. Face Houston this week, so not exactly a team that's going to punch you in the mouth, but a team that's showing signs of life. Do you expect this to just be, we're just sticking with this dream metaphor, is this the nightmare that they wake up from and they're still on track to be one of the better teams in the NFC, or are you a little bit worried?
This is what Aaron Rodgers called it, a kick in the ass. It's something they needed. And we all need those from time to time. And we've seen it with the Packers even from time to time in past years where they'll have games where they don't show up. And they know it. Some of the West Coast trips last year where Rodgers ended up calling out teammates for maybe not, treating it like a business trip, et cetera. In this case, though, I'm not going to say I foresaw as miserable as it was, but when Aaron Rodgers is going to have trouble, right? When they get pressure. Yeah. When he's pressured, it's a little harder for him. I mean, it's harder for everybody, but in particular, he seems to have a little trouble. And I was a little worried going into the game, or not worried, but I'd kind of dialed him back. It had mentioned that this was going to be a tough game for him. But one of my concerns there was Vita Vea. That pressure up the middle is the thing that is the killer of all quarterbacks these days. And and I thought maybe they can't get that same kind of push. They did, and and that was the issue to me. And I think it's a one game, obviously this week's opponent is going to be not nearly as severe, no matter what kind of sugar high they're off of the coaching change. They're just not going to be able to keep up with this offense. And I think we see a course correction ahead for Aaron Rodgers, the chip back on the shoulder that was knocked off by the Tampa defense.
I would expect that too. But just keep that in mind when we're forecasting matchups, when they play a physical team, maybe when they play the Bears again, things like that. What about, speaking of Tampa, what about Tampa's opponent this week? We forget about teams, like you said, this year. Time is moving in such a strange way, Bob, that, even going back to the beginning of the season feels like forever ago. And when a team's on bye, we almost just forget about them. The last time we saw the Las Vegas Raiders, they had an incredibly impressive win, really on both sides of the ball, against the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City. John Gruden somewhere saying, "You see, stick with my plan. Get my players. This is what we can do." Henry Ruggs is healthy. They come out of the bye and face Tampa. Is this another point where Tampa just reminds everybody that their defense is one of the strongest forces in the league? Or are we underestimating this Vegas offense now that they're going to have everyone healthy, everyone rested? Josh Jacobs could use that rest, I'm sure. And Derek Carr, we've been underestimating. What's going to be the headline after this Super Bowl rematch?
There is a number out. By the way, both those things are correct. The first one is more correct than the second one. But there's a number floating around the back of my head, and I wish I had it in front of me. Again, maybe I can whip it up here. But you look at Derek Carr's touchdown totals over the first couple of years of his career; they were as good as anybody's, right? And I mean literally good as anybody's. I think he was right up there with Peyton Manning over the first couple of years of his career. So. He's been this guy, but you got to protect him, right? You have to keep the people off his feet. And as soon as he has people around his lower extremities, he is not as good a quarterback. And I think that will be demonstrated this week. I will say, though, the Raiders are a better team than we expected or gave them credit for coming into the season. And we should have given them more credit. They had a lot of weapons. They were not, there was something to build off of last year, right? Whether it was Josh Jacobs, in that a strong ground game, Darren Waller, his ability to threaten opposing defenses at pretty much every level, right? I mean, he's not, and so you add the speed element and Henry Ruggs somewhere, Al Davis is sitting up there.
Yep. He was right.
He was right. And so, look, they're playing at a Death Star. There's something poetic about that.
Yep.
I like a lot of things about the Raiders right now, including, John Gruden coaching them. I just think they've put together some really good players, and it's something about Mike Mayock, that I think he'll do a really good job. And something I noticed was who's the defensive end they drafted last year, early?
Cleveland Farrell. And I remember everyone going, "Oh wow, what a surprise! Nobody saw this coming." You know why we didn't see this coming? Because Mike Mayock wasn't on TV talking about him. He was waiting to pick him, so nobody was talking about. So. I think we're going to see a lot of moves like that going forward, right? Some pretty savvy personnel moves. It's a pretty solid coach. They have, the healthy offensive line. If Trent Brown is healthy, if Ricky Incognito comes back at some point, and he can be healthy, they've got a pretty good base of talent there across the board. And with Ruggs and Bryan Edwards maybe back as well, I think that's an overlooked part of this offense. When he's healthy, when all the pieces are there, I like all the pieces. And the key again is keeping the pressure off Derek Carr and a strong running game. And look, Josh Jacobs, man, you look at deeper into the numbers last year, what he was doing against 7 men in the box and the tackles he was breaking, those kind of metrics. And he was pretty remarkable. He seems to be in that same lane again. And he's never, I don't think, going to be the receiving asset we'd all like him to be. And that's okay, man. Right. Or that he could be maybe, but that's okay because he's going to give you that solid week in, week out workload, the volume, and volume is what leads to production and eventually touchdowns and all those good things we really like. But but this week it's the Tampa Bay defense. Sorry. That was a long answer there. It'll be interesting because I think they'll bottle up Jacobs, of course. But like you said, it's about the pressure home because now we see the ability of Derek Carr to uncork those deep balls. And Nelson Aguilar, another guy that should be mentioned as an underrated factor for this offense. It's
and Hunter Renfrow, everybody's dad.
Sure. Well, it's all the disparate pieces, Bob. It's all the different parts of the field, different route you can attack, different ways you can combine what these players are doing. Waller and Renfrow in the middle of the field, Jacobs in the running game, and him as a receiver out of the backfield, Ruggs going deep, Aguilar actually playing more outside than inside. The point is, all these ingredients are trying to create something good. And Colton Miller, too. Speaking of draft picks, unexpected draft picks, between Miller and Trent Brown, who has been banged up but should be healthier coming out of the bye, they've got a top 5 tackle combination. And the Colton Miller pick was really mocked by a lot of people. Lots of traits, not great tape. Well, it's one of those things where, you can look at certain offensive tackles. I think Austin Jackson was similar, and he was looking good for Miami until he got hurt, where you see the traits, you can coach that up, but not the tape. And, of course, NFL position coaches, coordinators, head coaches are going to think, well, I can do something with that. And they took him before anyone expected. And that pick has really worked out for them. This is going to be a fantastic matchup. I'm mentioning
I agree. And I pulled up that number, Sig, so I don't sound stupid. Only 3 quarterbacks threw more touchdown passes than Carr in the first 4 seasons. It was Dan Marino, it was Russell Wilson, and it was Andrew Luck.
Yeah.
It was more than 8, man.
It's easy to forget that it was the year they went to the playoffs, Bob, and I forget what the starting quarterback combination was when it was an Oakland-Houston game. Was the most ridiculous starting quarterback combination because Carr was hurt, and I think the Houston starter was hurt. But he had that buzz and that about him as that young quarterback on the rise that is going to become one of the it quarterbacks in the NFL, and he never seemed to get that mojo back until the Kansas City game. In the Kansas City game, he looked like that guy again. Even in the Buffalo game, he made a few throws that reminded you of that guy, even though he didn't
I think I'd like him more if I didn't have to look at his brother lobbying for him on TV every day.
Yes, this is true. The legacy. David Carr, the cautionary example, right? Like, don't turn Joe Burrow into David Carr, right?
No!
Don't let it happen. You mentioned Al Davis. And by the way, you mentioned Al Davis, and we joke about it, but Mark Davis really said, like, my dad was always trying to replace Cliff Branch, and it really is a thing that kind of haunts the organization. But you think Al Davis, vertical passing, AFL football. The Chargers were an AFL team. They have a pretty good AFL quarterback right now, and it's been 4 games. And the last we saw, again, it feels like forever ago, on that Monday night when Justin Herbert really announced his presence to the world, and he looks like a kid. I mean, he really looks like I think he just doesn't understand yet the weight of the stage he's on, so he can just keep performing this way. But it's kind of like that euphoria we felt with Josh Allen early in the year, where, well, if Justin Herbert is like this, we were forecasting a Chargers offense that was shrinking, tiny. Tyrod Taylor, and against Anthony Lynn's wishes, they have, even if it's a low volume passing game, a vertical passing game with an excellent downfield passer. And you look at this and you think, I know Keenan Allen had this back spasm, should be okay coming out of the bye. You saw him with that excellent touchdown on the improvised play. Mike Williams, what he was doing. Let's not forget Hunter Henry. Let's not forget that Austin Eckler is going to be back this year. Could the Chargers be an elite offense? Are you buying this first 4 games against Jacksonville this week? It certainly shouldn't slow down. So are you bullish on the Chargers continuing this trajectory?
Yeah, you left out Jalen Guyton, who should be everybody's DFS darling right this week, going against the Jaguars. Yes. Look, so a couple things about Herbert that again, I'm not like draft Twitter. I'm not that person. We have friends who handle that business and they do it quite well. So I don't. But I notice a lot of people, the draft Twitter people, they come to a conclusion about players. They did it with DK Metcalf, where he could not do things, and you can. And one of the things is that I saw a lot about Justin Herbert, and I'm not trying to cast aspersions on anybody. We're all in here judging people and doing things, but most of the complaints about him were more about his demeanor and his his off-field mannerisms and stuff. And I think what you said is true. He's a kid, right? And when is he comfortable? He's comfortable when he's on the field.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obvious. He runs on the field. He does. He looks awkward and uncomfortable when he's talking to people and all these things. He runs on the field. He's 100% comfortable. And not only is he comfortable, he's fearless and has incredible confidence in his own abilities. Those are 2 things that'll take you far as an NFL quarterback, as long as you have a good supporting cast around you. He does. Mike Williams will go up and get that ball. Keenan Allen will get that football. Hunter Henry will get you the football. And even some of the other guys, I mean, Guyton, Hill, KJ Hill, Reed. I mean, these are all guys that you have some hope for down the road now, because you bring in a guy like Herbert, who is not going to, look, Tyrod Taylor, I have a soft spot for, but he's pretty well defined. He is not, he'll throw it down the field, but he is also looking to run the football. Justin Herbert will look at, but he wants to throw it first. And he wants to throw it as far as he can. And I'm all for that. And I think when Eckler's back, that'll help him out a little bit. Maybe, we'll see if my guy Josh Kelly can come back to life. I thought he was playing a little tentative against the Saints, and that's what happens when you have the fumbles. Anthony Lynn, a tough taskmaster, former NFL running back, not gonna have that nonsense. No. So I thought he looked slow against the Saints, but I think part of that was, he was playing cautious. And I don't think Justin Jackson is all that. So off my soapbox. Thank you, Josh McCall. But I do think all the pieces are there for Justin Herbert to have continued success from a fantasy perspective. They need to get some wins, though.
Yeah, they do. And they need to get some wins, maybe sneak into that number 7 spot and see what this team can do when they have all hands on deck offensively, because it is really exciting. And like you said about Herbert, one of the things I think that typifies this game is he's not playing, and even though it is Anthony Lynn's team, he's not playing to avoid turnovers. He's playing to make good things happen for his offense. He's seeing positive possibilities. He's creating them, and it's exciting.
I think we all need to step back, Sig, and thank the Kansas City Chiefs for forcing the teams of the AFC West to realize we need to play some offense, right? And we've seen it with the additions in Denver, with the moves they made here, the change in Los Angeles, and the Raiders have added the weapons. I mean, they all realize, this is a little bit of a track meet, this division. We better get some sprinters out there, and they've all done it to their credit.
Yeah, it's really, you're right. It's kind of like the pace setter in the race, getting everybody to cut down their times and set records for themselves. So yeah, the Chargers, the Raiders, you saw what the Broncos were trying to do. They don't necessarily have that in place yet.
They're your way.
Yeah, give it time. Give it time. Speaking of the Broncos, Lindsay, is this a 1 week thing because of strep throat? And I'm quoting Cecil when I make the air quotes. Strep throat. Or did Lindsay do enough in a win to show that he's not going to go away, and maybe he's even the more valuable guy going forward?
Yes, that is a correct answer. And like the strep throat quote, I was talking to Ryan O'Halloran from the Denver Post on my series show on Sunday, and he made a really good comment that I thought was, maybe because I'm old and it's easy for me to yes, but I mean, he just says, look, there's no way you could have a guy who gets a DUI on Tuesday and give him a jersey on Sunday. Right. You can't send that message to a young team. And so, but in general, look, Lindsay, every time he gets an opportunity, we've been talking about this for 2 years, right? I mean, and all he does is answer the call every chance he gets, right? Or, most every chance. I'm not going to say he's been phenomenal every single game, but, in the big picture, yes, he's been really good, and I think he's going to continue to be good. And that doesn't keep Melvin Gordon from being the piece. If going into the season, I don't know what your expectation was, but mine was maybe 60-40. And so if it turns back into 50-50, or if it goes 60-40 the other way against Gordon, I mean, look, teams, tip their hand with the draft capital invested and money invested, right? Yep. So there's money invested in Melvin Gordon. There's no draft capital or money invested in Phillip Lindsay, but they also want to win. And they also, performance does still matter. So, Gordon's going to get his chances based on that investment, but Lindsay's going to stay on the field because he's getting the job done. And I don't see any reason to believe that's going to end.
I agree with that. I said 60-40 this morning. I think 60 Lindsay, 40 Gordon. And
I'll buy that.
Yeah, well, I mean, just think that you can't put Lindsay back in the bottle now. I mean, I think they're just a better team with Lindsay out there. I like the point you brought up that Brian O'Halloran said, and what Cecil was getting at. You can necessarily come right out and say it. Strep throat, keeping Melvin Gordon at home. Okay, while we're talking backfields, let's talk some fickle backfield management. Sometimes these coaches are our enemies, or at the very least make our job a lot harder. Actually, Kyle Shanahan was not one of those coaches, as we saw in week 1, that it was Raheem Mostert's backfield as it should be. And then we've seen maybe some changing opinions as Mostert goes out. It's Wilson and McKinnon. Then it's just McKinnon. Then Mostert comes back. It's his show again. Then it's McKinnon. Wilson isn't even active. But by the end of the game, it is JaMycal Hasty. He looked pretty good. Bob, he looked very good.
He did look very good.
He did his job with the game still hanging in the balance. If you could have McKinnon or Hasty, or, we can also factor in like the price or the visibility, right? Because McKinnon should still cost a little bit more than Hasty. So, maybe Hasty is 75 cents on the dollar or less. But if you can have a chip with Mostert likely out for 3-4 games or more, where are you putting that chip in the San Francisco backfield?
If it's just a narrow band, probably taking my chances with Hasty. If it's, the course of the season, it'd be more McKinnon. I think, his role is going to kind of remain unchanged. But I mean, with Hasty, number one, we like to see the buzz we heard in the summer turn into a thing that we can hang our hat on again in the winter, and it looks like it's heading that way. But and while we're here, adding to the list with Stephon Diggs of people, I must apologize for my off-season slander. Raheem Mostert, I love you, man. I'm sorry. But most of that was Shanahan based, right? I mean, look, I could go back to late last season when Mostert was running wild and having beat writers on my show every single week, none of whom was willing to commit to Mostert being the guy because no, Shanahan's going to okie doke, right? I mean, that's their expectation, and so that was pretty much my expectation even coming into this year. Clearly, Raheem Mostert, and man, sometimes we just see these journeymen, figure it out at some point or fall into the right place, and he's clearly fallen into the right place. His combination of speed and decisive running, I think, is
conviction.
It had really served him well, and Shanahan truly appreciates that. But he's got to stay healthy and stay on the field. We'll see what happens when Tevin Coleman comes back too. I think he's going to mess
things up like he normally does.
We should not be totally dismissive of him because he's been around this offense for quite a while. So, but as of right now, if I needed a guy to carry me for a week or two, I'd roll the dice on Hasty. I don't think it was an accident. And so Wilson was hurt a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. Had the calf. So I'm, you'd like to believe that was like at least partially, but I'm not sure it was. So
I'm not either.
Right. Because he was pretty uninspiring, in his previous opportunities. That I think it was at least the last game, maybe the last two games, if I brought him up. But it was touchdowns only based on opportunity, and happenstance was the only things you had to hang your hat on with Wilson. And I think with McKinnon, you do have a little more role. Even I'll throw out the Dolphins game because that seemed to be skewed for everybody. And I know a lot of people were ready to give up on a lot of people at that point, but don't. I mean, that's what happens when you look down the drinking straw. You look at that one game and you think that's the entire season. It's not. So McKinnon over the long haul, Hasty in the narrow band, I'll play that, and if I and I'll die on that hill probably if it happens, but I'd be willing to give a shot on him just based on what we'd heard this summer.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think that first of all on Mostert, and I like this theme that's coming out, Bob. Maybe we should have done an apology show, like on the couch, players that we want to apologize to, man. Coaches, just to say we were wrong, and we get to be wrong a lot doing what we do, pretending that we can predict the future. But speaking on Mostert really quick, because we knew he was a world-class sprinter. But what really did click, and you saw this a few years ago when he had a mid-season window and then broke his forearm, but he looked good then. It really is the conviction. It is that Shanahan zone running game where it's understanding those three options and the decisiveness. And when you combine that decisiveness, he looks like one of those, what were they called, like top four dragsters? At the end of Mostert's long touchdown runs, you expect a parachute to come out of his back. Because how else is he going to slow down?
And that's, the speed has been what's kept him in the league, right? And that's been good. And by the way, he's a super nice guy too. And a surfer as a kid. And he almost went on tour. I had an offer from Billabong to be sponsored. And he came close, but he loved football. And the fact that he stuck with it all this time, going through, how many teams has he been on now? What, 5, 7, 8, 12, 30? But enough. So to see him get the success, and this is something that can happen, for running backs we've seen it before. But this scheme, I think, offers a great opportunity for the right players. That
surfer nugget on Mostert is that's why I bring you on the show, Bob. That's helping unlock the understanding there, because surfing, I mean, it is one of those disciplines that requires subtlety and nuance and a bit of surrender of control to something larger. To be part of it, just like a football, lots of waves crashing. It reminds me too of Ryan Riddle when someone asked about trying to tackle Marshawn Lynch because they were at Cal together. He said it's like trying to tackle a wave in the ocean. Right. So
it's funny too because I mean I don't talk about it a lot, but I get to talk to a lot of these guys, and some of them really stand out. Just their demeanor and personality, and Mostert is definitely one of those. He's just a super nice guy.
Yeah, another reason to root for him. But quickly on Hasty, there's the intuition, right? I mean, even whenever San Francisco added him after the draft, your intuition says, and then when you hear about him in the summer, and then that in the fourth quarter with the game on the line to salt the game away, Shanahan chooses him over McKinnon, and he looks good. He has that decisiveness along with those physical tools, the quickness, the agility, the burst, to be something potentially in this offense.
And this is the fun about fantasy football. So this is the
Right.
definition of it is we get to play off our little intuitions and prove that we're smart or smarter than or, as capable of as people who do this for a living, and that we were on this guy too. And I love those chances. That's one of the things I love about the game.
Yeah, I call it sharing in greatness. It's a chance to share in their greatness.
Exactly.
And another one this time it ties back into the theme I was saying of fickle backfield management, because Bob, and you're down in the southwest of New Mexico, so you'll understand too when I make a reference to a mechanical bull. Well, that's really more Gillies in Houston. But some of these backfields, they're like a mechanical bull, because you can kind of get in, speaking of surfing, you can get in sync with it. You're like, I got this, and then whoof, it throws you.
Yes.
And you get back on. That's how the Rams backfield has been this year. But Darrell Henderson, both through his play and usage, appeared to be the guy. Are you trusting this as we go into the matchup with the Bears, who have been pretty stingy, and as we go forward with the Rams?
I trust it in the moment. First of all, this is one of those great opportunities for me to tout how being old and mean and cheap benefits me when I was unwilling to pay for Cam Akers because I could get Malcolm Brown. I could get Henderson in the 10th or 11th. I could get Malcolm Brown in the 18th, right? So I have tons of shares of those guys, and the Browns are throwaways. The Hendersons are starting to pay off, and they've already probably paid off more. I've probably already gotten the return on investment I expected, and then some.
Sure.
And I think I'll get a little more. I think we'll all get a little more. And I'm going to go back to Jordan Rodriguez from The Athletic. I talked to her in August, and kind of really tried to pin her down, and it was basically when she goes, week 8 for Cam. She thinks it's good. She predicted a process. And I think it's not an unreasonable expectation. Maybe he's got to get fully healthy still. The rib, I'm sure, is still a little tender. I mean, I know he's supposed to be fine, but nobody's really fine. And he may not be fine all year. But you go back to last year. Go out on your Google device. Doug Farrar, our friend from USA Today, did a great, really in-depth piece on how Henderson fits Sean McVay's desires, right? On how he's a perfect piece for his scheme. It's a great article. It's actually with he talks to Henderson throughout, and they watch film together and just go through, and so that kind of stuck with me. And seeing it now, I can kind of see it. But do I trust it to last? Nah.
No. Well, that's fair. And McVay
again. Could.
Well, and maybe that's a sign to not, if you can help it as we go through the bye week gauntlet, maybe don't drop Cam Akers quite yet. Right. The other one here, Ronald Jones, is he settled it? Is it settled?
It should be. Again, there were some indications, going into this game, this was a good matchup for him, right? The Packers gave up a lot of yards before contact. It's not a bad offensive line. I mean, that works for his favor no matter what. But this game in particular, this game isn't the only game he's been pretty good in. It's it's coming together. And look, we'll see. I mean, there's going to be games where Leonard Fournette dominates a half, would be my guess, because we all know how backfields work, right? Somebody gets a hot hand and they're going to stay in. And maybe we're going to see at some point, Jones getting spelled for entire series. You get spelled for an entire series. Maybe that leads to a long run. And either way, it's fewer chances for the guy that we want, right? And so I think that should be your expectation going forward. But I think the Ronald Jones we've seen so far is Ronald Jones. Remember, he came in the league very young, right? And he needed some time to mature. He seems to mature. What better way to mature, too, than Tom Brady screaming in your face every time you screw up? And I guarantee you that's happening when we see it and when we don't. And so, I think guys, just by their nature, don't want to disappoint. You don't want to disappoint a guy like that you have great respect for. And I'm sure all these players do have just the respect that comes from the belts, the rings, right? So I think Ronald Jones is more real than not. And we'll see what Leonard Fournette does. He's going to be a fly in the ointment, would be my guess, just enough to irritate us.
Yeah, maybe for a touchdown here and there. But
yeah,
Jones, what you like, and you alluded to this, he came into the league, I think, as more of a Jamal Charles type runner, where he's looking for that one cut and trying to take it to the house. And now he's so physical and rugged. He's
And he
breaking
put on the
tackles.
weight this year, right? He built himself to do this a little more.
He did, and it's showing. And again, Tampa Bay, it's not Tom Brady. It's not Evans and Godwin. It's the defense. It's Ronald Jones. And one of the impressive things to watch about Tampa, because one of the things that's cool about this season, Bob, there's no dominant team. There's no dominant team on either side. And what you want to see is a team have an ethos and have everybody pulling in the same direction. And Tampa seems to have that right now, even though they had the loss to the Bears, they had the loss to the Saints to open the season. Things didn't go so well, but now things are going well. And again, that excellent matchup. And we get to the last 10 minutes, we can go off the rails. And we might make some enemies. Well, I might. You're gonna because look, I should really just strictly keep this because I'm looking over your shoulder, Bob. And this get into any number of conversations about cat people and dog people and cats and dogs and things like that. You're saying, ask me about my cats. And I've met, I actually saw Ming, I think the first time I came to your house. But anybody who knows Bob from social media should know his cats. I'm going to give you a chance to talk about your cats and the role they play in your life. And I think more importantly, in keeping your sanity.
Yeah, the cats are amazing. Ming the Merciless is been in his 13th year.
Wow.
30 pounds of Ming the Merciless. And then there's he might have been spoiled over the course of time.
Maybe.
And there's a smaller one named Wally who kind of was a feral cat that a neighbor was worried was going to get eaten by some wild birds or some hawks that were in their backyard. So I took over, and he's been a fine addition. He's a small murderous creature he's the neighborhood bully. Yeah. He's out and about a lot. He runs up and down the street. He gets in fights. He's scarred. He limps. He's dragging bunnies in through the cat door. He's everything you'd hope to have in a cat. So, and what they do is, you do tend to live a little isolated during football season. And so it's nice to have somebody to talk to. They don't talk back. No. And they're pretty good company. So, it's a little therapeutic. Also, I'm a turtle person, so the turtles are getting ready to hibernate. I believe they're still out and about a little bit, but the hibernation's coming soon, so I won't see them. But I love all the critters in my house, and the cats are mostly there because they don't require the effort that other critters require.
Sure, they're the roommates. They're not as needy, and they've got layers. And sometimes
in Ming's case, many layers.
Layers, yes, well played. And yes, Bob and I also our households share the love of the Western box turtle, also known as the ornate box turtle, which are really fun because I quote you liberally, Bob, but I remember one time we were talking about them and you said tiny dinosaurs, and it really is. You just got to have respect for reptiles. For me, it was horny toads, and I was so excited to see a horny toad when we went hiking on the other side of the Sandias, and I got to see a horny toad for the first time since I was a kid because they're not around anymore. And you just have so much respect for reptiles because they've survived. We're shivering because of COVID or climate change or whatever. Look at what reptiles have survived in basically the same form. And then living in the high desert, you see a lot of animals and plants that you respect how hardy they are. But I want to go back to cats. Go ahead.
I was very pleased. I was very pleased that when you came for the visit, the turtles came out for you.
Yeah.
Because they don't always do that.
They do, they're intelligent. They can recognize your voice. They do learn the patterns of things. Like our turtles always come out when we call my moniker in the turtles' minds. We say like Shadow Man, because like when the shadow comes over their little enclosure, that means that maybe some goodies are going to fall out of the sky. It's not that much different than some of our superstition, but cats. Because I spend a lot of time with our cats. We've got 2 cats too. We've got a Siamese. Until I had a Siamese, I didn't realize how incredibly outspoken. Like they have opinions about things, and they're really involved in your life. Yes. Some cats, like our Maine Coon, sleeps in the closet 12 hours a day, and people that have done house sitting for us don't believe that she actually exists because she just makes herself scarce. Not the Siamese, but I was reading some stuff, Bob, about how philosophers look to cats because cats seem to do what original philosophers were talking about, BC philosophers, where the goal of philosophy wasn't necessarily to find answers, Bob, but it was to find a way of living that made you not tilt too much one way or the other, that kept you in a state that the world couldn't really upset. And that cats can be our gods in that, basically. I know there's a lot of things that Bukowski said about cats too, just how they seem so content with themselves. They don't question things. I find that therapeutic, or do I just overanalyze my cats?
No, you're entirely right. And by the way, the discovery of that 2,000-year-old etching in Peru of a cat is further evidence that the cats have been this forever.
Yeah, well, Bukowski said the more cats you have, the longer you live.
True. I'm like 1,000 now. I think I'm going to get my next 1,000 in no time flat.
Exactly. And there's a lot of great stuff. But yes, and I just the whole idea of like domesticated animals that, we all have to. It's no different than what each individual faces, a choice of how are we going to make our way in this world? What's my place in this world? And cats figured out, like, well, if you just hang around the humans, here's a few little tricks, here's a few little hacks, rub against their leg, do the purr a little bit, and they'll give you anything, anything that you want. Dogs are playing it more straight up. Like, dogs are playing a game of like, I'll be obedient, I'll be what you need me to be, I'll help you. I mean, cats do some useful things for us too, like mousing and things like that. But dogs, they're workers. And cats are companions, sometimes companions. So I just actually have that in frame about my cats. And I think that we need to just start with two Twitters or groups of fantasy Twitter, the cat people and the few turtle people, or maybe we could just say reptile people. A couple of minutes, I guess, winding up here, Bob, too, because you're sagacious and you have a lot of hard-earned wisdom. We're now 7 months into our pandemic, and just how are you doing? How has this been treating you? As far as I know, that also you've got a budding, relationship and things. So it's also a time of fruitful growth in your life. But how has it been seeing this after everything that you've been through your life up to this point?
The biggest impact on me is guilt, in that I am fortunate enough to have a job where I work at home. I can do everything. It's had very little impact on me. I mean, I've not gone to a grocery store to shop in I don't know how many years, right? It's just, these are all things that are natural to me. So mostly I feel guilty that my life is so much easier than other people's lives. And, I'm mindful of people out there, and I realize it's easy to crack on people, do this, do the right thing, do all these things. And I think for a lot of people out there, they're sitting there and they're thinking, man, I'm standing next to a burning flame and I'm okay running through the smoke. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think, I want to give those people grace. I also, want to get through this pandemic. And I think, the smarter we can all be, the better off we'll all be in the end. But, in general, I think, one of the things that I'm coming away with in terms of, how it's impacting me with fantasy football, a couple things, is that I think the off season and the summer of not having that same level of intelligence that we've had in the past was a little bit liberating, and it freed me up to do things I wouldn't normally do, make decisions I wouldn't normally make, like just because I'm not overthinking, because I didn't have the information necessary to overthink, right? So I feel like I've done things this year that I probably wouldn't do. One of the things that I said I wouldn't do going into the season was I'm not getting involved with guys who are changing teams, especially receivers. Well, that went along until Robbie Anderson was sitting there in the 12th round of drafts. He's probably my most owned player right now. And it just, experiences like this maybe free you up and show you different paths that you would have taken in the past, and maybe making decisions that you wouldn't have made just because you're thinking about things in a different way. You're looking at the information coming in differently because there's different levels of information coming in. And as we go forward through this, the week to week uncertainty that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And it's going to get more, because it's going to get more. And the day, the day of game testing now is going to be an issue. That's a new thing that we are all deal with now, is waiting for that all clear on Sunday from Schefter or whoever it is doing their thing. And being willing to, being open to playing, to going with players I wouldn't know where you go with, or like looking at Thursday night's game as the sure thing, right?
Sure.
Like,
Bank the
I'm playing
points.
all my Thursday guys, right? I'm going to get them while I can because you don't know what the hell is going to happen on Sunday or Monday or Tuesday. And the other thing I've seen is the NFL. I think all along I felt like this was, whether you want to say to their credit, I'll say to their credit, they were determined to play a season, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everything they did, even in the face of all the worst case outcomes, they kept grinding away. And I remember one thing that I heard, Roger Goodell told everyone, I want to have a plan for everything. Hope is not a strategy. And they seem to have made good on that, and they're doing the best they can. And honestly, this is, this wasn't a thing. We didn't even know this thing existed this time last year, right? So we've all come a long way in learning this, and I've seen the NFL make an evolution in how they handle it. Even their week to week, day to day handling of this that maybe we can all learn something from.
Sure.
And I think we learn that from industries all the time. When there's a nickel to be made, somebody's going to figure out a way to make it. And in the end, maybe we can all benefit from some of the lessons that are learned from that. But I just think in general, I hope, think it's easy to get, we're an emotional people right now, right?
Yeah.
And it's something I've said for many years because I learned it as a young man. No decision I make based on emotion is a good decision. It never has been. I've never made a single good decision that was based on an emotional reaction to something. And so I hope we can all step back and, cool it down a little bit, think things through a little bit before we make hasty decisions, whether it's in life, business, or in our fantasy football teams.
Yeah, I like a lot of things you touched on there. Gratitude, feeling grateful, and having a chance to reassess things, reassess how you do things. And maybe we all have as a country a cooling off period. And the NFL, demonstrating that determination, and the players and coaches and staff deserve a lot of credit for acting wisely. We know 6 weeks in it'd be a lot worse if they weren't. So we all get to enjoy that, and then we'll see or we don't, and then we all evolve or otherwise still find ways to be part of each other's life. And that's really what this all revolves around. I'm so happy to be part of Bob Harris's life, have him be part of our lives and be part of your life as you're out there listening as we head towards week 7, folks. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to serve you in any way possible, and the privilege of doing that. And as always, we like doing that because you're so very classy.